has a birthday today. Senator, or excuse me, former Senator Wilborn, is this the day of your birth? Do you have any words of wisdom for us before we sing happy birthday to you? Yeah. By the way, I apologize. I've said this already. For those of you, when I forget your birthday, I apologize in advance. Okay. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Ricky. Happy birthday to you. Many more. But by the way, Senator, and I mean this sincerely. It is such a pleasure to have you finally getting housebroken. Okay. We'll get on to the real work of the day. First thing we're going to do today is have a hearing on HB 2122, and I'll now open that hearing, and Chris will give us an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, committee. House Bill 2122 modifies the threshold limit for allowing quarterly payments of annual registration fees for certain trucks and truck tractor owners, and also removes a kind of a 2-quarter grace period for delinquent quarterly payments. So the bill is amending KSA 8-143A, statute that provides for quarterly payment of truck and truck tractor annual registration fees. That statute does not apply to owners who, it applies to owners who own their truck. It does not apply to trucks registered on a portion basis or through some other agreement with the Director of Vehicles. Currently, that statute states that a truck or truck tractor owner can pay annual registration fees on such vehicle on a quarterly basis if the registration fee exceeds $100. What the bill would do is increase that amount to $300 to allow for quarterly payments. What the statute also currently provides that these quarterly registration payments are not considered delinquent until an owner fails to make any 2 quarterly payments during a registration year. Essentially, so a 2-quarter grace period. The bill would strike this language with the effect being that quarterly payments are considered delinquent 10 days after such quarterly payment is due. The consequences and powers of the Director of Vehicles regarding delinquent payments would then be allowed for such payments that are not paid after 10 days. The provisions of the bill would take effect on and after July 1, 2025, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Do we have any questions for the reviser? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the fiscal note. You look in your file, fiscal note, we've got a $2,800 fiscal note for modifying the automated tax system. Next on the agenda, we'll have proponent Deanne Williams, Vehicle Coordinator for Division of Vehicles. Welcome to the committee, Deanne.
Okay. We're on? Yep. Okay. Mr. Chairman and members of the Transportation Committee, I'm Deanne Williams, Vehicle Coordinator for the Division of Vehicles, and today we're here as a proponent for House Bill 2122. This is a bill that we requested early in the session, and it's kind of I kind of look at it as a cleanup bill. In 2012, when we put in the commercial vehicle registration, then we thought that we had everything taken care of. It was all under one statute, and as we read, then it's not, so we need to go ahead and take care of making the correction on this. Today, we're going to talk about the tags that look like this, the purple and white, and it says commercial down at the bottom. That's the one that we're going to talk about. And the intrastate or commercial registration has a quarterly base pay or a base pay of $100, and that's what they can pay quarterly at the present time. Where an interstate vehicle, then their minimum payment is, their minimum to make quarterly payments has to be $300. And as we look at that, then registration fee plus a commercial vehicle fee. The commercial vehicle fee for a lightweight vehicle is $250. So, you know, they're already almost to the $300 anyway. You put the registration fee on there and they're at the $300. So what we'd like to do by doing this, of course, it's going to make it easier for the county treasurers. It's going to make it easier for the folks that call in and have questions for our staff, because everybody's going to be paying the same. It'll level that playing field. So that's why we'd like to go ahead and move forward with this. And like I said earlier, we thought that we had all of this put under with the 8143A. We thought it would go under the commercial or under the IRP. And of course, we found out that it really doesn't. So by taking that step back, we're actually going to be moving forward and getting things taken care of. As Chris talked, we're talking about the payment on, if they don't make that payment within the 10 days after, so say on May the 11th, they come in and they make their payment, well, all fees would become due for the rest of that registration year, plus a 10% penalty because they haven't made that payment on at the time the quarterly payment is due. So, you know, that's the way it is right now. You have to pay a 10% fee, but it's just that some of them have had a little bit longer to make that quarterly pay. And so we'd like to bring that within the 10 days as we have on everybody else. So we wanted to make sure that this is one of the things you all knew about on that 10% penalty, because I know that when somebody gets that, they're going to call and they're going to ask you why do I have to make that penalty payment? Maybe I've already paid 2 quarters, but it goes on all of your registration fee. It's not just the remaining 2 quarters. It would be on the full registration fee. So it's 10% of that full registration fee that you would pay the penalty on. As written in the bill, we'll continue to allow for vehicle transfers. If you buy a new vehicle, trade that one in, then the fees that you paid on that first truck will transfer over to the new truck. If you outright sold it, we just need to see a bill of sale, and those fees will transfer also. If you park your vehicle and say, I'll sell it later, those fees would not transfer. So we do have to see a transfer of some kind. And with this legislation, it maintains the strict enforcement for collecting the unpaid fees, which is what we all want to make sure happens. Unpaid fees and penalties constitute as a debt to the state and create a first priority lien on the truck and other property owned by that delinquent party within the state of Kansas. Commercial CMV or commercial motor vehicle fiscal staff and county treasurer staff, they have to file a lien for the payments that are delinquent, and the state can then seize property or sell the property to satisfy those liens. We don't, you know, that's been done, I think, once in the whole time that I've been here, but we do have the ability to do that. And with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing us to bring this information to you, and we would stand for questions at the appropriate time.
So Deanne, do these unpaid fees and penalties that you were talking about that constitute a debt and a first priority lien against the truck, is that a change? I mean, are we changing that?
No.
So what are the things, help me just understand, what are the things we're actually changing in this bill versus the process?
Okay. We're going to increase the quarterly payment. It will have to be $300.
So it used to be 100, and now we're saying the minimum's going to be 300.
Correct. And then we're going to, on the penalties, instead of allowing them to have 90 days to make those payments, they're going to have 10 days past that due date.
Why did we switch it from 90 to 10?
Well, that's the way IRP is, and so by bringing the two together, then it just makes more sense. And if you walk in, you register a vehicle, you're a day late, you're going to pay a penalty right then and there on your vehicle. We're giving these folks an extra 10 days.
Okay, and then is this 10% penalty? Is that new? Or
No,
has it always been 10%?
it's 10% always. It has been that way.
So the real things are we increased the minimum to pay quarterly to 300,
Correct.
and we shortened the number of days it can be late on a quarterly payment from 90 to 10.
Correct.
And if, let's say it's their origination, like I pay my registration annually, I assume they can also pay their annual registration. What's the grace period on a regular registration?
You have from December 1st, well, really, January 1 to March 1 to get that
You can
paid.
run without paying your registration fees if you're paying annually for 2 months?
Anybody, in the commercial world, then they have those extra 3 months to get that taken care of, their registration.
Okay. All right. Those were my questions. Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dan, for being here today. Can you explain to me why current law imposes that 10% total registration fee or that 10% penalty on total registration? Why is it on total and not remaining?
Because that's the way it's always been.
Okay. There is no rhyme or reason on why it's that you can come up with?
All those people many, many, many years ago, they must have had a good reason to do so, so.
Senator, do you remember all those years? Never mind. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
By the way, when we say it's 10%, that's what it is currently on the fleets too, right?
Yes.
This is primarily the single people. So you got two kind of matching silos of fees. One is the intrastate and one is the interstate, and it's 10% on the interstate. So it's also 10% on the intrastate. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
Any other questions? Representative Delperdane.
And I thank you, Chair, and I think I know the answer, but I'm just going to ask, because I haven't read the statutes that are referenced here, but for the purpose of this bill, what is a truck?
Well, a commercial truck is going to be anything over 10,000 pounds that operates commercially, either intrastate or interstate.
I'm trying to say,
And so if it's a personal vehicle, then you're going to register, tax and tag at the county level. So nothing would change on any of that.
Other questions? Representative Bohai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your presentation. About how many trucks are we looking at here? Like, do you have a number from like 2023 or 2022?
You want to come up and speak into the mic, that's fine. Introduce yourself.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. My name's Donald Lee. I work for KDOR as a compliance person for the commercial and portions vehicles. So to answer your question, we average, as far as registrations, about 40,000 total. That's between both IRP and commercial. Commercial probably runs a little bit higher than that, or the average, it's not a complete 50-50. But I think the total number of accounts are right around 40,000 accounts.
And this might be back to Deanne. When you were explaining the fee going from 100 to 300, I thought I heard you say like 250 or something. So could you just explain why we're jumping that much? Because it seems big. Thank you.
Well, what we have is, we used to have, at ad valorem or property tax on vehicles. Well, we got to figuring that we're losing so much money because the out-of-state companies that were driving into the state of Kansas, they would not pay that ad valorem tax. So in 2012, we put together a formula that took all of the commercial vehicles as well as the IRP vehicles in Kansas as well as out of state, and we brought in, it's called commercial vehicle fee. And we have, and that is in 8143M, as in Mary. And it goes by weight. So if you have a brand-new vehicle, like 1 to 3 years old, then you're going to pay the 250. You're going to, and it goes down from there. And then if you have a 80,000-pound truck, they're going to pay $400 for that commercial vehicle fee. So that person that has the commercial vehicle, they're going to pay $250 for their commercial vehicle fee. And then they're going to pay for their registration fee, which is like $30. And so right there, you're at $280. And that's what they're currently at right now.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
And, you know, one of the questions I had, that 40,000 that you said, that is only the ones covered by these statutes? Is there anybody ahead of you? Representative Hall-Heisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This will be real quick. Since we're talking about registration fees, you don't have any excess registration fees for any hybrids or EV commercial vehicles currently, do we? I see a head shake from behind.
Yeah, we have registration on those.
On commercial?
Oh, no, I don't think we have any on commercial.
have no
No.
Okay,
No.
that's all I needed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, or wait, do we have any other proponent testimony? Seeing none, we'll move on to neutral testimony. We have one neutral testimony, and it's from Travis Gauerholtz with the Kansas Motor Carriers Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the chair stated, my name is Travis Carholtz, appearing before you on behalf of the Kansas Motor Carriers Association. I will make this quick. You'll see my testimony in front of you. We proposed changing kind of that 10% penalty thing after discussions with the department, and appreciate them reaching out to us and discussing this. We have decided that, you know, we're going to talk with them a little bit more. I think there's some strains on our proposal to change that to a 10% on the annual remaining. I think there's some things we need to talk about a little bit more detail. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to, you know, stand in support of this bill. This is something I think, you know, our industry is comfortable with.
So you're a proponent at this point?
At this point, we would, yeah, be supportive of the legislation as they want to move it forward, yeah.
All right. Anybody have any questions for Travis? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. Do we have any other neutral testimony? Seeing none, do we have any opponent testimony? Seeing none, I will go ahead and close the hearing on House Bill 2122. Committee, next on the agenda, we have House Bill 2261, changing the classification of majors in the Highway Patrol. Chris, could you give us an overview of that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, House Bill 2261 would provide that Kansas Highway Patrol majors are within the unclassified service under the Kansas Civil Service Act, and provide a permanent status ranked for Highway Patrol superintendents, assistant superintendents, and majors for them to be returned to after holding such positions. The bill amends KSA 74-2113, which is a statute that establishes the Highway Patrol and provides the employment qualifications and procedures for Highway Patrol officers. Currently, that statute provides that superintendent and assistant superintendent of the Highway Patrol are within the unclassified service under the Kansas Civil Service Act. The bill would provide that Highway Patrol majors are also within the unclassified service. The bill also specifies that upon a superintendent, assistant superintendent, or major fulfilling a term and leaving such respective position, the officer shall be returned to a rank with permanent status not lower than the rank the officer held when the officer was appointed to one of those positions. The provisions would take effect July 1, 2025, and I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Anybody have any questions for Chris? Seeing none, we'll move on to the fiscal note. And they say there's no fiscal effect on their operations. And with that, we have one proponent that I have down, and it's Merle Riedel, the Executive Officer of the Kansas Highway Patrol. Welcome to the committee, Merle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Merle Riedel. I am Executive Officer for the Highway Patrol, and I speak on behalf of the agency today in support of this bill. The bill would amend KSA 742113 to clarify that a KHP employee holding the rank of major is within unclassified service under the Kansas Civil Service Act. As the revisor noted, the bill would continue to affirm that when a major's appointment ends, the employee shall return to the rank with permanent status not lower than the rank the person held when appointed. So some background on this: the Kansas Civil Service Act divides employees into classified and unclassified service. Classified employees are selected according to merit through a competitive process and are afforded certain employment protections. Unclassified employees can be directly hired and serve at the pleasure of the agency's appointing authority. KSA 742113 designates that KHP ranks are within the classified service and which ones are held within unclassified service. So currently, statute specifies that the superintendent and assistant superintendent are within unclassified service. The statute also clearly stipulates that employees of the rank of captain and below are within classified service. However, due to some ambiguous language, it's not altogether entirely clear under that statute where the major falls into that, whether it's classified or unclassified. This ambiguity has resulted in litigation and uncertainty concerning whether majors are eligible for the KHP Career Progression Salary Plan, which is for classified employees only. KHP currently employs 6 majors, and just as a reminder, the major is a position that is subordinate to the superintendent and assistant superintendent, but is superior to the captain, lieutenant, and troopers, and the major is typically considered an executive level position. This bill would make no changes to those employees that are currently holding those unclassified positions. That would not change for them. The bill also does not impact the protections afforded to the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and majors should their appointed position end. Should there be a leadership change and employees in these positions are not selected to retain their rank, they would transition to their previous held rank with permanent status in the classified service. So KHP supports House Bill 2261, which clarifies statutory language to affirm that KHP majors are within the unclassified service, and we thank the committees for the opportunity. I would note we did have some discussions with the Office of Personnel Services and the Department of Administration, who provided some valuable feedback prior to submission of this bill. And Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to stand for questions.
Anybody have any questions for Merle? Seeing no questions, I have one. So in your testimony, you say that the current majors all voluntarily accepted an unclassified employment status upon appointment. In what manner did they accept that? Is it part of a contract or?
Correct. So that is when the job is posted, because revisions to the Kansas Civil Service Act in 2015 allow for conversion of classified positions to unclassified positions. That position is typically advertised as an unclassified position. So when they accept that position and sign that agreement, that is for an unclassified role.
So it's been tradition and custom for them to be unclassified in the past, and it was the litigation that raised the question.
Correct. So in recent years, since 2015, that has always been an unclassified position. However, the classified position of major still exists on the books. So it is still existing. There is a position and a pay structure on the statewide pay matrix for that position. There is no one that fills that position. It's not the agency's intention to have someone fill that classified position. We use them as unclassified employees. However, statute currently, as it exists, would permit that, and in some instances is confusing about whether that position is classified or unclassified. So when a new employee is accepting or looking to accept this position, this would make it very clear to them what statute, the role statute permits them to take.
All right, thank you very much. All right, seeing no further questions, thank you very much, Merle. Is there any other proponent testimony? Seeing none. Is there any neutral testimony? Seeing none, we'll move on to opponent testimony. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the hearing on HB 2261. At this time, I'll open House Bill 2222. And Chris, will you go ahead and give us an overview of that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee House Bill 2222 requires ignition interlock device manufacturers to pay fees to the state for the administration of the ignition interlock device program. The bill amends KSA 8-1016, which is a statute related to ignition interlock devices for use by persons whose driving privileges have been restricted to driving a vehicle equipped with such a device. The bill amends subsection C to require the manufacturer of an ignition interlock device to pay the following fees to the Highway Patrol for the administration, oversight, and monitoring of the ignition interlock program. So first, a one-time fee of $10 for each ignition interlock device installed by the manufacturer in Kansas on and after July 1, 2025. And the payment's counted and remitted on a monthly basis. And also a fee of $5 per month for each ignition interlock device in use and maintained by the manufacturer in Kansas, also counted and remitted on a monthly basis. The monthly fee shall not be assessed or remitted if the ignition interlock device is installed for and used by a person who the division determines is eligible for reduced ignition interlock device program costs pursuant to subsection F of that statute. The bill would also amend that statute to establish the IID fee program fund. The fund is administered by the superintendent of the Highway Patrol. All monies received pursuant to this subsection from the fees will be placed in the IID fee program fund and shall be used for the purpose of funding the administration, oversight, and monitoring of the ignition interlock program. The provisions would take effect July 1, 2025, and I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Anybody have any questions for Chris? Representative Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I understand it right now, there are no fees that we discussed here that are applicable in Kansas. Is that correct?
Yeah, no fees paid to the Highway Patrol for the administration.
Do other states have fees paid to their Highway Patrol or state police?
I'm not sure of that information. I can find it unless another conferee has that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Everybody will go on to the fiscal note. Fiscal note shows that in 2026, it'll increase total revenues to this new fund by $648,000, and then the same amount in fiscal year 2027. So with that, we'll move on to our first proponent, Lieutenant Matthew Payne with the Kansas Highway Patrol. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee. I'm Lieutenant Matthew Payne with the Kansas Highway Patrol, work in the breath alcohol unit, and as a part of the breath alcohol unit, I help oversee the ignition interlock program in the state of Kansas. The ignition interlock is a small handheld device that's put on vehicles for those drivers who've been convicted of a DUI. It has been since 2012. In 2022, the Kansas Highway Patrol received the authority to oversee that program, the vendors and the offenders as well. What House Bill 2222 would establish is a one-time fee of $10, as you've already heard, for every install, and then $5 a month for every ignition air lock in use for that month. The fee would be waived if someone was on the KDOR, or Kansas Department of Revenue Affordability Program, which reduces the fees of the ignition air lock if they are 150% or below at poverty level. And what this would do is this would allow the Highway Patrol to have greater oversight of the program, because currently those funds come from state funds. We don't receive funds, as you've stated, Representative Goddard, we don't receive any funds from those manufacturers or the offenders, so to speak, except a $10 license fee when they first get it through KDOR, which is minimal. To answer your question again, there are other states that do this very similarly. Washington does it this way. That's how they fund their program. I believe we're actually a little cheaper than most states. But just to give you a perspective of the program and what it is, this program is essential to public safety and what it is. Just to talk about the efficacy of this program and the importance of this program, just in 2024 alone, ignition air locks in the state of Kansas prevented the start of a vehicle 67,212 times when the operator's BAC was between 0.03 and 0.079. Also in 2024, those who tried to start the vehicle with a BAC of 0.08 or greater, which is the legal per se limit, it prevented that vehicle from starting 8,373 times. So this program does work. It's efficient. There are currently 9,915 ignition interlocks in the state of Kansas in operation. According to Kansas Department of Revenue, there are approximately 36,000 people who have that ignition airlock restriction. So there are quite a few people that don't have that installed on their vehicle. This funding would also allow us to broaden that scope as well. Just to give you an insight into what we do, there are two divisions. There's a vendor compliance. The vendor compliance has the responsibility to oversee all 7 vendors in the state of Kansas, as well as 300 service centers and 400 technicians. They oversee the certification of every technician, every service center, every vendor, all the devices. They also work as a go-between, or kind of a problem solver between the customer and the vendor as well. Currently, we have 1 employee that is tasked with that. We have the offender side, which does, since 2012, we're compliance-based removal, which means the last 90 days of usage. We have to basically have no serious violations of the use to get recommended for full driving privileges to be reinstated. Last year, our division, which is comprised of 3 troopers, did 5,135 ignition interlock reviews. 3,909 were recommended for completion or otherwise successfully completed the program. 1,136 were denied completion for several different reasons. Of that, we take into account that sometimes those devices don't function maybe as exactly as they should, or there's some extenuating circumstances. So we do have a process for a secondary review. 90 of those people who were denied asked for a secondary review, and 51 were still found not in compliance. 31 were found to be in compliance. So one of those examples would be, let's say, for instance, the cord went bad and it showed a tamper or circumvention. Well, the company can look at it, give us a note, sign an affidavit that say that was not the person's fault, this was an equipment failure. We would then sign off and say that we recommend that person for completion as well. We have cameras we go through. This is not just a process where the trooper sits down and checks a box. They have to go through piles and piles of data to make sure that these violations are attributed to the right person. For instance, the restriction applies to the individual, not the car. So if 2 are married and their wife, who doesn't have that restriction, takes the car, she's not required to comply with all of the ins and outs of the device. But the device is still asking for rolling retests and everything else. So we go back, have to file through the pictures to make sure that those violations are attributed to the right people. So again, this is a huge program. It's expanding every day. I don't think that we are outside the box asking for $5 a month or $10 per install, especially when we're willing to waive that. And as I stated, currently this is paid from the state fund. It's kind of our perspective that those making money and using these devices should bear the burden to carry the responsibility to oversight and administration of said program. With that, Mr. Chair, I will stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Does anybody have any questions? Representative Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wow. That seems like an awful lot of people, an awful lot of engine starts that were denied. I do have a question. When a person completes the program successfully, is the interlock device removed and returned to the vendor, or what happens?
Yes, sir. The way most of these manufactured work is they're bought on lease. And so when they're done, they'll return the equipment as soon as they're recommended for completion.
And then it can be put back into use again if it checks out and everything?
Yes, sir, after it's serviced by the manufacturer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. When these interlock devices are ordered by the court, is there a fee that the person who committed the DUI pays?
So yes, sir, it depends on the company. Are you speaking to like a monthly fee that they have to pay to use the? Yes, sir.
I'm trying to get to the point here that if we assign a $10 fee to the manufacturer of the device, that will be passed on to the person that needs the device. They're the ones actually going to pay for the thing.
Yes, sir. In conversations with the vendor and their lobbyist, Mr. Kevin Barone, that's exactly what they'll do. That's what other states do. Quite frankly, not to speak out of turn, but on most of their forms, invoices, there is a monthly fee box. Right now, Kansas just doesn't assess any.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Chair. Just curiosity question, where you mentioned roughly 67,000 starts prevented. I've never seen one of these devices, so does it connect via cellular, or is it just log it and then you take a reading monthly or something, or how do you know that figure?
It goes both. How do we know the figure? That's reported from the manufacturers. They have two different devices. Some are cellular service, which is real-time reporting. So as soon as they have a registered BAC or they have a violation, that is reported to the manufacturer. Not all manufacturers have cellular service in their devices, and so every month they have to come in and get an inspection to make sure that the device is calibrated, it's still hooked up, it's working correctly, basically to keep the manufacturer, to make sure that their device is still functioning correctly month to month for the individual. And at that time, there's a download that's done, and then that information is dumped into a database and returned to us.
Okay. So I assume you blow in it like a normal BAT type device or blood alcohol thing. So you mentioned if, say, the spouse was driving it, will the vehicle start if there's no blow, or how does?
No, sir, they'll have to blow to start it, but then after that, it asks for a rolling retest at variable intervals. And so a lot of, it won't shut off if you don't, I mean, that's dangerous to have the car shut off going down the road, so it'll just register that the person didn't complete a rolling retest, but it will not start unless a breath sample is provided. Thank you.
Any other questions? Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, these are really small fees, so I'm imagining it only mitigates the total program cost. What additional cost will still come from, was it Kansas Highway Patrol's budget? What's the remaining cost to the department outside of this proposed fee?
For numbers like that, I would have to defer to the finance experts. I don't deal with that portion of it. Ms. Merle would probably give you an answer for that.
Merle, would you like to come forward and please introduce yourself again for this hearing?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm Merle Riedel, Executive Officer for the Kansas Highway Patrol. The portions of this that would likely not be covered if these fees were implemented, salaries and wages largely for some of the troopers that are involved with this, that would continue to come from the operations fund, and really just sort of some of the overhead, the use of the facilities and IT information systems. So these increased fees would help cover specialists that deal with these types of equipments, whether it's inspecting them or certifying their use.
Thank you, Merle. So, but these fees would actually cover the actual installation costs and ongoing monthly operation costs of the device, outside of salaries and wages and things like that.
Yeah, I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Chair.
Next proponent that we have on this bill listed as a verbal is Ed Klump. I don't see Ed in the room. Is that in here? All right, so if everybody will please review his testimony. It must have been written or something. Do we have any other proponent testimony? Seeing none, we'll move on to neutral testimony. Do we have any neutral testimony? I see none. Opponent testimony. Do we have any opponent testimony? See none. So with that, committee, we'll go ahead and close the testimony on the hearing on House Bill 2222. And committee, that concludes our work today. I'll give you a little bit of a heads up for the rest of the week. We're going to have three hearings tomorrow dealing with license plates, one of our favorite things. They're not all just your run-of-the-mill license plates, though. We only have the FFA with us tomorrow. But also, at the conclusion of that, we'll take possible final action on bills previously heard. So we'll probably look at 2121, EV registration fee bill, and then the three that we looked at today. So if you have any amendments, that you want for any of those bills, make sure you get with Chris and get them drawn up in advance. I'm not a big fan of conceptual amendments unless it's extremely clear what we're doing. So if there's nothing else for the committee, we're adjourned. Thank you.